Good evening, brother, and welcome back to another episode of Light Upon the Altar. And as we usually do, we will invoke the blessing of deity before we move forward. Dear Supreme Architect of the Universe, may those words come directly from you. May we ever just lay our hearts on you and allow you to work in our lives and just make us not only better Masons, but better men. Glad you gave me this opportunity, put it in front of me, and allowed me to shed some light on the more benefits and our faith and how it relates to our lodge journey. In your precious and holy name, amen. So mote it be. So, brothers, welcome back to the next episode. The last few episodes, we've talked about some different things. On our past 4 episodes, we've talked about the belief, how we must come in with belief already. It's not something that it's a religion. It's not like we're coming to find a higher power or a higher being. We should already believe in that. Sacred instruction, light. And when I talk about sacred instruction, that comes from what we worship from, whether that be the Holy Bible, Quran, Torah, anything out there that you use to worship the Supreme Architect or the Great Architect of the Universe. And prayer and how we use it, just not in our daily lives, but how it applies to us inside the lodge as well, and why that we use that. So this episode is going to be a little different. We're going to talk a little bit about the faith in action, living the Masonic virtues inside the lodge and outside the lodge. And we're going to talk about some of the unavoidable questions. What difference should all of this make? You know, it's just a big thing. It's kind of like in your own faith in action, when you actually see what you're doing, it should come out through your works and stuff like that. Same as living out the Masonic virtues, the things that you do, the brotherly love that we spread, there needs to be some faith in those actions. Because faith does not shape behavior. Let me start that over. Because faith that does not shape behavior is sentiment. Light that does not guide action is decoration, and masonry that remains in ritual alone is unfinished. Today we're talking about faith in action, living the Masonic virtues where they matter most. And that's just not inside the lodge room, but that is applying that to our everyday lives as well. So let's jump right in. Virtue is practice, not performance. So our Masonic virtue, it's not performative. It's not something we perform. It's not just for show. It's not about being seen, and doing those good things. It's kind of like in your own faith, they say works without faith is just equivalent to dirty rags. It's the same way with you're inside the lodge. If you're just look at me, look what I've done for the craft. That's not what it's about, guys. It's about just spreading that brotherly love and the big thing is being consistent in what we do. Whether that's being consistent in our ritual work, that's being consistent in our, education and stuff like that. It's a big thing, and that's what I love about doing this podcast. So much I just get to dive into and learn about the craft and stuff like that, even be consistent in your ritual, though. When you're asked to do something, make sure you know it. At the end of the day, yes, when the candidate hears something, it's the best he's ever heard, because, well, guess what? He doesn't know any difference. I always appreciate, even at our basic stated meeting, if I mess up on opening or something like that, I got brothers that, hey, you're supposed to say this, and it's about being consistently good. If we learn bad habits, we're going to consistently say them wrong. So, That's a big deal. The real test of a Mason's character happens when honesty costs him, when kindness is inconvenient, and when integrity stands alone. So let's talk about that a little bit. When honesty costs him, so doing the right thing, you know, just being honest and not telling a lie. And if it cost you something, if it cost you a friendship, probably was never a good friendship. If it cost you promotion at work, you probably don't need that promotion. You know, that's just part of our character as good men. You know, integrity should be everything. So if honesty cost you something along the way, well, it was probably for the better anyways. So uh, when kindness is inconvenient, you know, sometimes this can be a hard one, even in our own faith. You know, sometimes just being kind is inconvenient. You know, sometimes we just want to be the lower versions of ourselves, and but you know, I always say when you hit some of that, sometimes killing things with kindness is the best thing to do, and sometimes that's an inconvenience to us because sometimes we just don't want to do that. We want to be petty about things, and but as we grow, just not Masonically, but even in our faith, you know, the more we grow, we should lose that. We should find ways to be kind, even if it's inconvenient, even if somebody's not being kind to us. It's the right thing to do. Then, when integrity stands alone, you know, at the end of the day, integrity, your word, that's all you got. You know, and you should be thinking about those types of things, you know, when nobody's looking. You know, I've always thought about that, but, you know, being in Freemasonry and stuff like that, it's just not when the light's on me. Um, that's not what it's about. It's when the light's not on you. What are you doing? You know, do you think about, oh man, as a person, is that the right thing to do? And, you know, those are just conscious decisions that we have to make. And then lastly, virtue is not proven in ceremony, but it's a choice. So we can do all this stuff, and you know, we can talk about these lessons in our lectures and our studies and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, we have to put it to work, and you know, it's just not proven there. It's how we live out our lives. You know, how do we live out our lives and every day where it comes to our home lives as fathers and husbands and you know, brothers and stuff like that, and you know, how inside the lodge, you know, how do we conduct ourselves with this? You know, it's just not proven through ceremonies we do. You know, it goes back to kind of some, you know, if we just talk about these things and do them inside the four walls of the lodge, I mean, it's like going to church on Sunday and sinning the other 6 days of the week, you know. So we got to make that conscious choice to do the right thing. Next, I'd like to talk about brotherly love in a divided world. Brotherly love is not agreement, it is a commitment. It means listening before judging, showing patience when frustration is easier. Boy, I know I gotta grow on that one. And that's just not in the lodge. That's also in my own personal life. Treating others with dignity, even when they fall short. So you know, a big thing that we do in the world is most people, when they're listening to somebody speak or talk or whatever the case may be, they're listening to answer. They're not listening to understand. They're not listening to gain concept. They are listening just to respond. And that is, you know, a big failure of communication. And, you know, even going back to the first thing, brotherly love is not an agreement, it is a commitment, you know. Yeah, we should love our brothers because they're our brothers. But we got to be committed to that brotherly love. And that's just like with anything in life, you know. It's got to be a commitment. It just can't be an agreement because, well, somebody told me that's what I should do, so that's what I'm going to do. It's a part of a lifestyle. You should change. It should change you, and you know, you just got to make it part of your everyday habits. Showing patience when frustration is easier. Boy, this is just a big thing for me. Um, even in my daily life, sometimes, I'm really patient, but then sometimes I just let the frustration really, really, really get to me sometimes. And I just went through that the last few weeks. Frustration was getting to me, um, and it just changed who I was, changed my character, and so on and so forth. And, um, I had to really look in the mirror and, realize that I was part of that problem. I could have eliminated a lot of that frustration by just exerting a little bit more patience and uh, seeking more understanding in what I needed to do. Treating others with dignity even when they fall short. So, guess what? We're not perfect. None of us are perfect. There's only one perfect person that's ever walked this earth in my mind, and that was Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior. But, you know, I fall short every day. Um, Sometimes at work, sometimes as a brother, sometimes as a husband, a father. Um, you know, I hope somebody shows me just a little bit of grace because things happen. We're human, we make mistakes. In a world that thrives on outrage, brotherly love is an act of quiet resistance. And that stands so true in our world today. We live on such division in the world that um, just being who we are as Masons and spreading the cement of brotherly love that extends outside the four walls of the Masonic lodge, just not showing brotherly love, but just love to everybody. It's the greatest commandment, as I've learned in my faith, is love. And that can be a very strong act of quiet resistance. And, that's what we need more and more in this world today is just um, brotherly love, humanly love for one another. Um, so we can take that however we want, but the more love we spread, whether it's brotherly love for our neighbor, our country, we just definitely do not want to add to the division. And that was my next point. Mason does not add to the division. He works to heal it. And, sometimes the things that we're taught work at some of them sore spots, whether it's in our own personal lives or it's at work or, whatever we need to. Let's not add to the division. Let's work to heal it. Let's not be part of the problem. Let's be part of the solution. Next, I want to talk about relief as a way of life. Relief is more than charity. It is awareness. So, we talk about come to the relief of a poor, distressed master mason. And that's charity in action, when we're showing that relief, right? But it's aware that it's around. A Mason practices relief by first noticing the need, responding without being asked, and giving without expecting return. So, the big thing is we see a problem, we fix it. And don't expect anything in return. When you give, you should never expect anything in return. Anytime I've ever given anything in life, I've had to learn, don't expect it in return. But don't let people take advantage of you either. It's just one of those things. Like, if I got it to give, I'll give it to you. If I can't, give it without expecting a return, is it truly giving? That's one thing that I really challenge you on, if you're just expecting some kind of big thing out of it because you did what was right, you're not doing it for the right reasons. Just my personal opinion. True relief, this is big, true relief is not measured by recognition, but by impact. So think about that. True relief is not measured by recognition, but impact. It's the impact can go far beyond that day, far beyond that good deed. And maybe they can't pay it back to you, but maybe when they're in a position, they pay it back to somebody else because they know what it's like to be in that vulnerable position in life. And you know what? Somebody helped them out. And then next thing you know, hey, you know what? I'm standing on my own 2 feet. Let me help this person out, just like somebody helped me out along the way. And, You don't need to be recognized for it. And we live in that world. Seems like today, you see it all the time on social media and so on and so forth. People, they want that gratification and that recognition. Like, oh, look, I just gave this homeless man $1,000. Oh, come like my page. And yeah, that's great. But what's that $1,000 done for that person? You've made their life easier for the next maybe couple weeks, especially in today's world. And, if you're doing it just to be recognized by the world, you're really not coming to true relief of anybody. You're just easing a temporary pain and you want somebody to pat you on the shoulder. And that's just not the way it works. If I do something for somebody, I don't care. I don't need recognition. I did it out of the goodness of my heart and I was in a position to do it. And that's just the way I live my life. Sometimes, I'm extra blessed and I like to bless people that are around me. And I don't do it because I want to show off. It comes from a place of deep love within my heart. Next, it reflects a heart shape by compassion rather than obligation. So I was already going into it without even looking at my notes. It's a heart thing. It's just like even with our faith. You really don't have that change until you have that heart level change. And it's just a reflection of the heart and compassion rather than obligation. You just do it because you're a compassionate person coming to that relief, coming to that aid. I think about that obligation and I take it very seriously. Just a little story. There's my son's grandmother, well, technically stepson, but he's still my son. His grandmother is actually the widow of one of the past masters at my particular lodge. And, I take that obligation very seriously, about taking care of, I never met the man, but, I take that part of my obligation seriously, but it's from the compassion of my heart to make sure that she's got the things that she needs and stuff like that. It's not because I'm obligated to do that. Whether it's, she's just a human being and I want to make sure her needs are met because she's shut in. She really can't get out. So, it's one of those things that I do it out of the compassion and the kindness of my heart, not because I'm obligated to. Next, I'm going to talk about truth as a daily commitment. Truth is one of the hardest virtues to live. It demands a lot from us. And, some people, sometimes they want the truth to be what they want you to hear. It's not always the truth, but they're trying to, there's a difference there. And it demands honesty in speech, transparency in action, and consistency in private and public life. When I think of truth, it's always about being honest, and that's just a big thing. You should always be honest, whether it's with yourself, with fellow mankind. It's one of the hardest things to do, but, sometimes we want to tell half truths, as people, or the truth that fits our narrative. That's why they say it's so hard. But the more that we can do that, the better that we are as a society and as a fraternity. Transparency in action. It's just, let's not leave it black and white. It's black and white. It's not gray areas. I hate gray areas. It should just be black and white. Consistency in private and public life. What are you doing in your private life? Are you living that same truth and honest lifestyle? Or are you just doing it when you're in the public eye and like, oh, look at me, look what I did, or when all eyes are on you, so it's always consistent. It's about being a consistent human being. And it's just what we've been talking a lot about being consistent, in everything that we do. So truth costs reputation when deception would protect it. And that's where I can talk about them half truths sometimes, or the truth that fits the narrative and stuff like that. If it cost you some friends, it cost you some people in your life because you told the truth, so be it. You know, um, those aren't the type of people that you should care if they care about your reputation or not. Um, Even if it's something bad. Maybe you did something bad, but the truth is the only thing that can set you free. And that's just a big thing. Truth cost comfort when silence would be easier. So, it's one of those things that's uncomfortable. Sometimes admitting when you're wrong, right? But sometimes it's the comfort knowing that you did the right thing and just not being silent about it, sitting in the shadows, just being honest about it. But, the biggest thing when you just live that whole truth and such and so on and so forth, that truth, it builds trust, and trust builds legacy. Because when I lay down my working tools, I wanted to be known as a person that lived by the truth and a person that could be trusted, not just by being a Mason or anything, just by what I've done, my actions. And I'm not worried about a lasting legacy. But I always want to be truthful. I don't want anybody to be like, he was a dishonest person. Next, the lodge is a training ground. So when we think about this, a lot of these things we learn inside the lodge is kind of a training ground for making that good man a better man. All right. So the lodge is not the destination. It's the workshop. It's where we put in the work. It's where we put in the effort. It's where we learn. But hopefully outside of those four walls, you're also diving in deeper and learning more things just about the craft and the meanings behind things. Each thing that we do, there's definitely a meaning behind it. And you should definitely dive into those things and not all at once. Don't take a big chunk. I'm doing this podcast, I'm learning just as much, researching these things and stuff like that and speaking these words as I learn. We learn virtue inside so we can practice it outside, because that's where the real work begins, is outside the lodge. And Mason does not ask, how does this look? He asks, is this right? That may sound kind of crazy, but, we're not. How does this look? We're working our whole lives. We got this rough ashlar, and by the end of it, we want to make it a perfect ashlar. We want to make sure it's measured just right. Everything, every rough corner has been smoothed out. The whole stone has been smoothed out, and it's in the smooth, perfect, ready to fit into our final piece, into the great lodge above. So when we ask, when we're done, is this right? And that can be in anything. It can be in some of the actions. Say somebody asks you to do something. That's against your moral guide and your moral compass. Is this right? If it's not, if this isn't right, it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. That question asked consistently changes a man. So when we look ourselves in the mirror and we've done something that we're not so proud of, we might think, how does this look? But when we're on the right path, we're like, is this right? Is this the right thing to do? Next, faith that leaves a mark. Faith in action leaves evidence. When you put faith in your works, there's going to be evidence left behind. People are going to see it. And that's great, because it should. And things that you do, just not with inside the lodge, but outside the lodge. When that faith is in action, there's going to be evidence of it. There's going to be people are going to think, oh yeah, that guy right there, he's a good man. He's done a lot of good things, and it'll show. And you also see this, it strengthens your family. reputation's earned. You definitely don't want to be known as a liar. You want to be known as an honest person. The communities that you served and the lives that you improved. One big thing that I love about the community in which my lodge is located, in Birdseye, Indiana, is one big community project that we always do is funeral dinners. So some people are like, well, that's the right thing to do when a brother passes. Well, we just don't do it for Masonic families. We do it for anybody within the community. And we serve the community by, hey, we got a place right here. We will provide you a meal, take care of the cleanup, because, when somebody dies, the last thing you want to do is clean up a big meal, or cook a big meal for all the family that's came in. We can take care of that for you. And lives improved, we should always be pushing our fellow man to be better. And, that's inside the lodge, outside the lodge, just connecting with our neighbors and everything, and just trying to improve life for people. Masonry does not promise perfection, because we're far from perfect. Like I said, we all start with a rough ashlar, and we're trying to perfect it. But hopefully by the time you were done on this earth, on this plateau, and you lay down your working tools, it's pretty dang close to perfect. But it does demand progress. And that's just with anything that you do in life. As you're working on things, it don't have to be perfect. But as long as you're a work in action and you're progressing in life and doing better, that's what really matters. And guess what? If you failed today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, 5 years down the road, just remember that every day is another opportunity to build better than before. And sometimes, you know what? You may have to rebuild several times to get to the right way you're going, to the right actions, and just building that perfect path, each day is that opportunity to seize. So when I look at things, you may have had a bad day, but guess what? Tomorrow's a new day to start. And I can leave a little bit on that, Thomas Edison, for example. He failed 1,000 times, trying to create the light bulb, right? But if you asked him, he just learned 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb. So, he took each failure as an opportunity, as like, what am I missing? And, hey, he finally got it right. All right. So that is all for today's episode. I'm going to start wrapping this up for you. A little bit longer than usual, but as I keep going, I keep kind of growing in my confidence in this. So I hope you have enjoyed everything. But let's end with this truth. The world does not need more men who talk about virtue. It needs men who live it. That is the calling of a Mason. Let me repeat that one more time, because I believe this truth is very big. The world does not need more men who talk about virtue. It needs men who live it. And that is our calling as Masons. Not only do we talk the talk, but we walk the walk. And that's the big thing. So in our next episode, we're going to explore the working tools as instruments of spiritual growth and how they continue shaping us long after the degree work is completed. Until then, labor well, act justly, and let your faith be known by your words. Until next time, brothers, so mote it be.